Record. Good morning and welcome to our shir today on Pareshat Emor. So if you do have a chumash, you're welcome to follow in the chumash. Otherwise, I'll try to do my part in sharing with you the verses you'll need for our discussion today. So the parsha itself, Emor, starts off with the unique role of the Kohanim. And then it moves on, and the bulk of the last part of the parsha deals with the Chagim, the Moadim. So before we start analyzing the parsha itself, I'd like to share with you something. And I'm going to share the screen. This will not be for the whole class, but we will share with you the following. Do you see? Please nod if you see the Rambam there. Yeah, the Rambam is there. Okay. So we're going to start off by studying some words of the Rambam. And we're gonna go ahead and read it carefully. And it works as follows. Says the Rambam. Mitzvahs essay, there's a positive commandment. Lispor, to count. Sheva Shabbatot Tmimot, to count 7 complete weeks. The Omer, we're all familiar with it. We start right after day 1 of Pesach and it ends with Shavuot. Now, when does the count start? So again, we're familiar with this as well. Meyom, from the day of Hava'at HaOmer, from the day that you bring that offering in the Bet HaMikdash, known as the Omer. Shene Emar, and the Rambam obviously wants to share with us the verse. Sfartem lachem imacharat Shabbat sheva Shabbatot. Okay. Now, the Rambam just identified the main mitzvah, counting weeks. You hear this? The main mitzvah is counting weeks. Then he notes, in addition to counting of the weeks, umitzvah limnot hayamim ima shavuot. In other words, once you are counting the weeks, count the days as well. Shene'emar, and again he shares the first, tisperu chamishim yom. And then he tells us, you should know, umatchilat hayom monin. In other words, it's important to start counting the beginning of the day, the beginning of day 1. Even though it didn't pass, you say today is day 1. Lefikach moneh balayla. Therefore, it is a mitzvah to be performed at night, starting from the eve of the 16th of Nisan. Okay, now, my father asks the following question. My father asks, you should know, if you realize, if you read the words of the Rambam carefully, he is telling us that the main mitzvah is counting of weeks. In addition, we count days. Regarding the days, he tells us that it's important to count in the beginning of the day. So if so, why do we not count weeks in the beginning of the week? In other words, just as when it comes to the days, you count in the beginning of the day, the first day did not pass yet, but you're into the first day. Well, on the first day, you are into the first week. So why not say it's the beginning of week 1? Come up with a formula of expressing the idea that day 1 is the beginning of the week. This is a question he asks. So my father notes, and I'm quoting here, Inyan hayamim. You should know that the matter of counting days, hem chelek shel inyan shavuot. In other words, the main count is really weeks. And by the way, it's called Chag HaShavuot, the celebration that occurs after counting weeks. However, there is a mitzvah to count days within the week. So when we say, Kilomar, when you say Hayom Yom Echad, Hainu Ha'echad Shel Shavua Aleph, on day one, you know what I said on day one? Today is day one of the week. The week is more important than the days. You need the days, but the goal really is to reach the week, okay? And based on that, and again, I'm not going to spend too much time, but you see in the third reference, before we go back to our regular style shir, in the reference here, my father quotes the Ovia Ezri, one of the early German Baalei Tosfos, one of the Rishonim, who actually notes that on day 8 of the Omer, you don't say today is 8 days at all. All you need to say is today is 1 week and 1 day. Because when you count days, it is only as components of the week. The week is what is significant. Okay? So the question I'm going to be leaving us here with is, why do we view the days as only pieces or parts or pieces of a puzzle to complete the week? It appears that the week has something more significant. The days are only a piece in the puzzle to complete the picture with the week. Okay? So that's the question we'll be addressing today. So now let's get back to the parsha. Now, over the years, Baruch Hashem, we've had the opportunity of studying Pareshat Emor several times. And one of the main themes that we've discussed is the unique role of the Kohen to teach you about the value of life. In other words, as religious people, it is fundamental for us to believe that there's more to life than the physical. There are things that are unseen. And when we are really plugged into that idea, right? Meaning when it's more than just the concept we believe in, but we allow that concept and the knowledge of that to really guide us throughout life, life is good. And the reason that life is good is because we have these existential struggles that we have. What is existence about, right? Someone sent not long ago a bumper sticker that they saw. And the bumper sticker said, "How am I driving?" And under it, it says in smaller letters, "How does a car work at all?" And under it, it says, "Why are we here at all? What's the purpose of existence?" Right? So these are existential questions. What is life about? And I think naturally there are some people that struggle with it more than others. You know, we're different people. Each one of us is here to make a different contribution. There are those who naturally, it's within their nature to wake up every single morning and ask themselves, what's this all about? And then perhaps they get a good reminder, Modeh ani lefanecha, I'm standing before God. I have a purpose. So they need the clarity that their religion provides for them to get through their day. Then there are other people that are just happy. They wake up, they do what they're supposed to do, they see the good, and everyone makes their own contribution in their own way. No question about it. Life and the world would be a very boring place if we would all be exactly the same. But the Kohen is here to inspire us. You know what? There's purpose in life, not just to get to our destination, not just because one day there's Olam Haba, but realize that there's so much you could do and achieve, and life is beautiful and life has purpose. That is what the Kohen is all about. And therefore, message number 1 of the Parsha is, you know what a Kohen has to keep away from? He must keep away from Tumat Met, coming in contact with the corpse. There are many, many rules and guidelines. We know that Kohanim don't enter into funeral homes. We know that Kohanim don't enter into cemeteries. Those are the laws. What does it symbolize? What does it represent? In other words, it's very hard, to be a Kohen when there are situations that technically you would be required, to honor someone, to go to a funeral. It's not always easy. If the Kohen only focuses on what the law is about, there'll be a challenge for his journey. But when he realizes what it symbolizes that you represent life. When you go ahead and come in contact with the corpse, when you have to go ahead and enter into a cemetery, it takes a toll on a human being. I can tell you that going to funerals, walking into a cemetery, walking into a funeral home, dealing with these issues take a toll. We humans, we're sensitive beings, very sensitive beings, very complex beings. These things take a toll. The Kohen, the concept is to teach you. He is the teacher that is there to inspire you, to see what you could achieve. And there have been Kohanim for 3,400 years. And then there have been those that have the personality of a Kohen. Perhaps they're not really Kohanim, and it's not to say, it's always important to remember that when a specific unit within Klal Yisrael was given a role, it doesn't mean that every single Kohen is going to be this upbeat, cheerful, optimistic guide to the value of life. It's not the case. I mean, I interacted with my maternal grandfather, my Zaidi, and he was a Kohen, no question about it. But I hope my mother's not listening, but he was not exactly this optimistic, happy, cheerful. He was a Yeki. He was very, very precise. He was never late, never late. Not to a second late, always exactly on time, and everything was done precisely the way the halacha requires. So he was a Kohen, but he didn't exactly fill the role. So obviously there's a concept that the Torah wants us to walk away with, the value of life. So this is really what the parsha is about, the purpose of life. We always talk about this concept. Now, with that, we could appreciate why the Chagim, the core parsha of the Chagim, appears in Pareshat Emor. Why is it that it was given to the Kohanim to teach and inspire, while Shabbat is to remind us of Olam Haba, Me'en Olam Haba, right? It's the world to come. We taste the world to come. We detach ourselves from the world. And even when it comes to the way we label fulfillment and meaning of Shabbat. In other words, on Shabbat, we don't talk about simcha. It's not a day about happiness. It's a day about oneg. And oneg is really something far more spiritual, right? It's much deeper. In other words, I'm happy when I enjoy a good food, right? A good coffee. I'm happy. I don't know if it gives me oneg. I'm not sure. On the other hand, if I'm studying some text and there's great difficulty, there's something that simply does not make sense, right? And I'm working very, very hard to try to figure it out. And then suddenly I find one of the commentators explaining it. Or even better, if I could come up with an insight that provides clarity in this section of the Talmud. I'm very, very happy, but that's different than simcha. That is like an oneg. You feel some kind of spiritual fulfillment. And this is relevant, I think, to all of us in life. When the more connected an act is to something spiritual. In other words, I think we all know that when you do acts of kindness to others, right, or a successful prayer, and you feel meaning that is closer to oneg, it is more spiritual. Shabbat is more spiritual. It's not about being in the world. It is to remind you that, you know what, there's something beyond the world. There's something spiritual. That is the oneg Shabbat. Yom Tiv is about simcha. It's far more physical. Among the many people that inspired me, throughout my life. One of them was a rabbi. His name was Reb Shimshon Pincus. Shimshon Pincus. Rabbi Shimshon Pincus was a very well-known lecturer in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the Jewish world. And he would speak to crowds of thousands of people, over 1,000 people, several times a month in Israel. Very inspiring, very passionate. He was a unique individual because he studied in the brisk yeshiva. So he was very committed to the dry teachings of halacha, that where satisfaction is found in fulfilling them with precision. That was Reb Shimshon. And at the same time, he became very mystical, and he was extremely knowledgeable in areas of Kabbalah. So you had a mystic brisker, one of the few perhaps that are walking on or ever walked on this planet. So he was a very inspiring individual. And it's interesting to note that the first time I met him was when I was sitting Shiva for my father. So this goes back to January of 1993. And I remember him walking in, and I remember communicating with him. And a short while afterwards, I went down to Chile, and he served at the time as the head of the Kollel. He served as the head of the Kollel. Now, among the many inspiring things about him was the fact that he would sometimes give a talk to the wives of the Kollel members. So he would say, tonight at 8 o'clock, there'll be a little bit of a shiur for the women. So this was a small group. So you would have perhaps 8 women that would come to the room to give the lecture. And what was inspiring was that the same passion that he was able, to give a lecture to thousands of people, he was giving it in a room to 8 people. In other words, what really gave him this drive to communicate ideas was not the number of people in front of him, but what he was teaching. So that was Reb Shimshon Pincus, a great person. In the past, I've talked about him and about his life. Among the many lessons he would teach was the following, that you should know the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov is as follows. Imagine you have a king. The king invites you into his palace, right? You come to his palace. You don't come with your own food, right? Unless you perhaps don't trust the hashgacha. But the normal way is that you walk into the king's palace, and there's an understanding that everything is taken care of there. I don't need to prepare anything when I'm in the palace. I prepare before going into the palace. I want to be sure that I look presentable. Perhaps I want to become familiar with what the king is interested about because I want to communicate with him. I want to compliment him about his leadership. So I want to read a little bit about the way he leads the country. But once you are inside, everything is taken care of. That's Shabbat. In other words, you enter into Shabbos. Shabbos is a relationship with the king. It's a spiritual relationship with the Almighty. Don't focus on preparing things. You are in the king's palace. Anything that you have was prepared from beforehand. Oneg Shabbos, nothing prepared during Shabbos. On the other hand, Rabbi Shimshon would say that when you invite the king into your home, you're very busy at that time. You want to be sure that he served the finest, the freshest, the best food. Yom Tov is inviting the king into your home. Now, it is a very important message to understand all of our Jewish journey. The Jewish journey is one where we balance the knowledge that, there's a higher being, there's a neshama. We are going to, yes, there is a concept of olam haba, and we get a little bit of a taste of it, of a relationship with the God in a very spiritual sense on Shabbat. But don't forget that throughout your life, you are going to be in the physical world. You're going to be in your home, and you're going to welcome that king into your home. And the journey of Judaism is to realize that you are to be involved in this world. You are gonna be involved in the marketplace, right? You're gonna be doing your taxes. You're gonna go ahead and be dealing with fixing your car. You're gonna be in a very physical world, but you know what? You could bring that God into your home. And that's what the Chagim are about. All of them relate to the cycle of nature. Spring, the time of harvest, the time of ingathering. These are Chagim that relates to nature. And just as nature goes to sleep, in essence, throughout the winter, there are no Torah Chagim during the winter, right? So it's really an outlook of how to look at the world and how to look at life. And it's tragic when people believe that the spiritual journey is one that takes place in the study hall or in a synagogue. It's tragic because we're not always in the study hall and we're not always in the synagogue. We are interacting with the world, interacting with people. Come the Chagim and tell you, you know what? You are living in the world. That too is spiritual. And that is the role of the Kohen. That is the role of the Kohen. Fine. So this is really how the Parsha comes together. We've discussed this in the past. Now, with that, we are, there in many shuls, one of the times that brings excitement to people, and I'm not joking here, besides the Kiddush, which we haven't had throughout the COVID, is when there's no Tachnun. Now, you really have to appreciate this idea of the happiness that takes place in a shul when there's no Tachnun. And if you haven't seen it, it would be nice to even film the enthusiasm and the excitement. You see people coming in. And I can tell you that that's what happened today. And I'm one of those people too, by the way. Hard to explain why. I'm one of those people that when you know that today, for whatever reason, you don't say Tachnun. Tachnun is a sad prayer. It talks about filling your bed with tears. Due to the intensity of that prayer, on days when there's some level of happiness, we don't say the Tachnun. Okay? And due to the fact that we like not being depressed, over the years, we've added a few days to not saying Tachnun. And one of them was today. Today, being the 14th of Iyar. On the 14th of Iyar, we call it Pesach Sheni because once upon a time, when there was a temple, people would bring their sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, as a makeup if they weren't able to do it on Pesach itself. It was brought on the afternoon of the 14th of Iyar. Rule is that when you bring a Korban, that day turns into a Yom Tov for you. So since once upon a time, 2,000 years ago, this day turned into like a Yom Tov for our ancestors. So therefore, we keep that tradition on, right? We keep that tradition on, and therefore we treat it like a Yom Tov, and we don't say Tachnun. So there's some level of excitement. How much more so, by the way, when one of those days occur on a Monday or a Thursday. You know why? Why there's such excitement? Because on Monday and Thursday, our Tachnun is even longer. So if we are able to shave off another 5 minutes, there's excitement. Human nature is such. Now, when it comes to times when there's a debate among authorities, if there is no Tachnun or not, the debate relates to the 6 days after Shavuot. 6 days after Shavuot. Why is there a debate? So it works as follows. Again, in the days of the Bet HaMikdash, we are told that when a person would come to Yerushalayim, make his Aliyah LaRegel, he would bring offerings. One of them was known as a Korban Re'iyah. It was a burnt offering. The other one was known as a Chagigah. However, these Korbanot cannot be offered on a Shabbat. In other words, even though you could offer them on a Chag, They cannot be offered on a Shabbat. So what happens when Shavuot falls on a Shabbat? When can you go ahead and offer your korban? So it doesn't happen today, but in those days, we were told they had 6 days after Shavuot as a makeup. Due to the fact that 6 days after Shavuot, you were able to bring a korban, so it became a time of celebration clearly in the days of the temple, and therefore many communities like us over here, we do not say Tachnun for the 6 days after Shavuot. Fine. And the truth is, if you think about it, when you count units to reach a specific period of time, it is logical that if you're counting units of days, you are counting to a specific day. In other words, during the Omer, we are counting 49 days. And then we reach our destination, day 50. Logically, the same should apply to weeks. If we are counting 7 weeks, so therefore the destination should be week 8. So week 8 should have significance. So clearly, in the days of the temple, in the days of the Bet HaMikdash, Shavuot was celebrated not just for one day, but for 6 additional days. And I have no doubt that in Yerushalayim, after Shavuot, people were still making their way to the temple. And there was the enthusiasm and the excitement of a Chag for 6 days. Right? So it gives us a logical explanation as to why not to say Tachnun. However, and this is an interesting discussion. It works as follows. There was a rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Reischer, early 18th century, and he notes the following. If let's say, come Pesach, and for whatever reason, I did not make the Shehechianu on the Seder night. I didn't make a Shehechianu. So the rule is that as long as you are still during the holiday, you could still make the Shechianu. So you can make the Shechianu on day 2 of Pesach, or even on day 7, or outside of Israel on day 8. Now, says Rabbi Reischer, you should know that even nowadays, where we don't have the Bet HaMikdash, even nowadays, if a person realizes on the 6 days, during the 6 days after Shavuot, that he or she forgot to say the Shechianu, you could still say the Shechianu. That's what he notes. Now, there's a little bit of a mystery, because in the days of the temple, there was something tangible during those 6 days, something tangible. Nowadays, what is there after Shavuot? There's nothing left. You might have some leftover cheesecake, right? And if you have an issue with dairy, your stomach might still be complaining to you that you ate too much of it during Shavuot. But what tangible mitzvah do you have on those 6 days after Shavuot? That's a question that many authorities have asked. So some claim that, listen, we know that there's a mitzvah called Kabbalat Pnei Rabo, to greet the presence of your teacher. And it is done in Israel. It is common that teachers would open their doors for their students. Rabbis would open their doors for their talmidim. So therefore, perhaps the mitzvah of going to meet and greet and interact and be inspired by your teacher, perhaps that continues for 6 days after Shavuot. And that is actually comparable to going to the Bet HaMikdash. The goal of going to the Bet HaMikdash was to be inspired. So too, by going to my teacher, I'm inspired, perhaps. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a different explanation as to why the 6 days after Shavuot have significance. And it works as follows. In this week's parsha, if you have a chumash, you could go ahead and look at chapter 23, and it is around verse, let's say 22, verse 22. At this point, the Torah just gave us the details of Shavuot. What do you do on Shavuot? You bring some offerings. Fine. And then I'm going to read to you verse 22, right after Shavuot, before the Torah spells out the next holiday on the calendar, which is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The Torah tells us, you should know, ubekutz rechem, and when you reap, et ktsir artsechem, the harvest of your land, lo techale pe'at sadecha, you shall not remove the corners of your field, but rather, what do? La'ani ve'lager ta'azovatam. You be sure to give it to the poor and to the convert who does not have a field. Ani Hashem Elokechem. Verse 22. Right afterwards, it returns to the holidays. So this is striking. You have your holidays, and smack in the middle, a mitzvah of giving to those who are in need. What's it doing here? So the obvious explanation is that, listen here, the Torah wants to remind you, right after Shavuot, you make your way into the fields. It's summertime, harvest. So therefore, remember the poor. Perhaps comes the Chatam Sofer, comes the great Chatam Sofer, and he shares with us the following, that you should know. The 6 days after Shavuot have mitzvos of Shavuos, but it's not the traditional mitzvos that you would find as a chag. It's not eating the matzah. It's not shaking the lulav. It is to take care of the needs of the poor. That's what it's all about. For 6 days after Shavuot, that should be your focus. There are those who are in need. You are walking into your field. You feel the blessings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have yield. You could feed your family, not just now, but throughout the summer and the coming winter. It is your mitzvah at that time, the 6 days after Shavuot, to think about others. That is the mitzvah, says the Chatam Sofer. Now, based on that, we could appreciate the fact that we, even without a temple, and even without being in the land of Israel or farming in the land of Israel, we have something tangible after Shavuot. What is it? Think about the needs of others. That's what it's about. Okay, now, this fits well, very, very well, into the theme of the Parsha of the Kohanim as well. We've all heard and learned about Hillel the elder. We've heard about Hillel. And Hillel teaches us, Hevei metalmidav shel Aaron. You want to be a good Jew? You want to really live the Jewish life the way you should be? Become a disciple of Aharon HaKohen. That's what Hillel teaches us. What was Aaron HaKohen about? He was one who was Ohev Shalom, a lover of peace, Rodev Shalom, Ohev et Habriot. He liked people. Mekarven LaTorah, brought them close to Torah. Hillel was one that was guided and inspired by Aharon. Now, there's another well-known saying of Hillel, Im eina nili, if I don't take care of myself, mili. In other words, responsibility number one in life is to take care of self. And this is why we find Hillel turning to his disciples and saying to them one morning, I'm going to do a great mitzvah. And the students ask, Master, what are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to bathe myself. I'm going to take care of myself, my physical body. It's a great mitzvah. How did Hillel have such clarity that is considered a great deed to take care of your own personal needs? He was inspired by Aaron that talks about the value of life. And you cannot go ahead and have an impact on others to value life if you don't take care of your own. Now, after you take care of yourself, After I go ahead and follow the teaching of Im Ein Ani Mili, I realize Shani La'atzmi. But if my whole goal and my whole essence is only about self, Mani, what am I achieving? So this journey of taking care of self, when a person values yourself, their interaction with others is a healthy one. I remember pointing out to one of the kids once when we were driving that there was a car next to us that was banged up, scratched up, the bumper was hanging. It was a nest that it was still on the road. And I told her, I said, Aaron, you have to be careful with such drivers. Why? Because someone driving a car that they have no concern at all about damaging their car, it can't get more damaged, are not going to be concerned about your car, right? In other words, when you're on the road and the driver next to you is careful, that's because he doesn't want to bang up his own car. When he's not concerned about self, it's very possible that he could cause damage towards others. And it is so true that when people have a healthy way of taking care of themselves and they value what they are doing, it's so fundamental. And I think it is the most important teaching of every educator, to every student, to all of us, that it is something we should remember every day. What I do is important. I'm doing something important. Obviously, that is only true when you are doing things that are important, like thinking about others, davening, right? When you go ahead and commit yourself to Torah, you interact with others in a decent way. I don't want to go ahead and give this lecture to a bunch of people that work for the mafia, right? This is a very dangerous lecture of you're doing good. It's always a problem, that you give this self-help message, and imagine you're giving it to criminals. Well, you're doing good, you're doing the right thing. God wants you to wipe out so-and-so, right? I don't want Al Capone to be tuning in, or any of his Talmidim to tune into this idea. But for those of us, and every single one of us, we do good, pat yourself on the back, my goodness. And it is tragic when you have people that do incredibly good things and they don't give themselves credit. And it's a problem in an era when things that are not publicized are not real. It's a whole generation that's growing up that if what I do is not on Instagram or on WhatsApp, it never really happened. Meaning, if I go get a good iced coffee in Starbucks, right, or some kind of delicious dessert, and I enjoy it, I'm gonna immediately post it, because if I didn't post it, it never happened, right? That's how the world works. And as a result, you have people, scrolling. You could have people scrolling for hours, seeing all the fun things that others are doing. So I got to do something fun as well. So only when it is public, then it was a real deed. If I do it in a private way and no one knows about it, that's no longer valuable. So you have people doing incredible things. But since there's no write-up about them in Mishpacha magazine, and since there's no videos about them on YouTube, they don't value what they are doing, right? Think about the parents that are taking care of a special needs child, day in, day out with commitment. And anyone that has any seichel realizes they're doing the most incredible thing for the Almighty. No question about it. But there's no article about them. They're not getting the publicity. They're not on CNN. So once in a while, they might think, what am I achieving? That is tragic. The journey of life and the goal of the Kohen is to remind the person, life is important. And when you do good in this life, you're doing incredible things. Value what you are doing. When you create such a healthy person, they could in turn go ahead and have a positive influence on others. That's how we make the Jewish world a better place. Realize, and that's what our Kohanim are for. And the Chagim are to teach us that idea. Yes, you sit down, come Shavuos, and if you could eat that cheesecake, you eat that cheesecake. It's not just, the goal is not to make that bracha on the cheesecake. It's the goal is to realize this world has amazing things. I'm going to appreciate it. Nature, right? Eventually it's going to warm up here, perhaps in Toronto one day. and we're going to be able to walk through a park and see a magnificent, and here the birds are already chirping. We could return to nature and realize this is beautiful. It's the handwork of a creator. When I have that attitude that I value this world, value self, then I could go to the next step and think about those who are in need, right? Those that I could uplift with a word, or at times with actually giving them food or money. That is Shavuot. That is what Shavuot is all about. Torah was not given to angels, right? That's a rule we're always taught. Torah was given to physical beings. And this idea, when we analyze Shavuot in depth, you'll realize that the offering that was brought in the Bet HaMikdash actually had chametz in it, which was unique for the temple. Chametz was a symbol more of pleasure, right? Something more enjoyable. Shavuot is to tell the human being, enjoy the world, do it for the sake of heaven, and then right afterwards, after the day one when you took care of your own needs, go out and have an impact on the world, right? So you need the one. So let's put this together. You need the day one of Shavuot, and I'm talking obviously the way we should be celebrating Shavuot one day, and I'm looking at some people who are in Israel, and they're smiling because they keep one day Shavuot. The one day Shavuot, where you, yes, take care of yourself, right? And you remind yourself of this idea that there's value in this world, is to go ahead and inspire you to use the next 6 days to give out to those who are in need. You need the one to fill the 6. Okay? Now, with that, if you remember, in the beginning of the class, I shared an insight from my father, Olav Shalom. And my father said that when it comes to the counting of the Omer, the weeks are really what's important. You need the days to reach the week, right? And therefore, on day 8, you don't even have to mention it's 8 days, because once you completed a week, the week is like as if the main counting is the week. You need units of 1 to reach that week. So if regarding the destination, right? The destination, the goal is to have 1, meaning 1 day of Shavuot, where I think about my importance and the importance of my existence. And I realize that it is only there as a component to reach the week being the 6 additional days when I think about others. That clarifies the process of the count. Because when I count those 49 days and 7 weeks, it's to reach a destination. That destination, you want to know what it's all about? Yes, it's about days, but the real goal is a complete week, the 6 additional days. That's what completes it. The one unit, yes, is important because I have to start off by taking care of myself, but the 6 additional ones are how I think about others. That's what makes the complete week, which is the main count. It's a count of Shavuot, not just about myself, but about those who have needs around me. And obviously, all humans have needs, right? There's no question about it. And all of us have that unique role. And sometimes you could have a person that is basically their whole life is taking care of the needs of one person. And that is their mission, and they're doing meaningful things day in, day out. Others have the role of perhaps taking care of the needs of a couple people. And sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a person to just focus on themselves, take care of your own needs. This is your mission in your existence. And when we do it with an understanding that this is what we should be doing, it brings simcha and it brings oneg, because you are doing something spiritual. So that's the journey of Pareshat Emor. It's one of those fundamental parshas that tells us what we are here for, what we are about, and gives meaning even during challenging times. In the past, like 2 years ago, I do remember talking about the Kohen talking to people about being appreciative of how magnificent the world is. It's all true, but we need those words of encouragement also during times of challenge and challenging times we are living in. But Amir Hashem, hopefully we learn these lessons, become better, become inspired, and become people that live a life of meaning. Okay, so eating cheesecake lishma, that's what's suggested here. So some people said, like, it was a good point that was mentioned, that maybe the 6 additional days of Shavuot are like a Shavuot Sheni, and you could eat cheesecake versus 6 days. All important things, but there's a mindfulness that we could have, right? Whenever we do one of these things, whenever we experience something enjoyable, there are moments of mindfulness where we could think about, this is a gift from someone great, and it is here for a reason. And Baruch Hashem, over the years, I've interacted with many, many people that have lived their life by really taking these messages, positive, optimistic, finding meaning in life, thinking about others. And it's nice that, and it's a merit to live in a nation that has many, many such people. And hopefully we could all learn from them and continue this important journey of our existence. Thank you so much for tuning in.